and the hotel chain called the Hoxton Hotel Group. But back then we were 3 people in a basement doing a magazine, so I kind of kept in touch, and now we get to work for Blenheim Palace and other exciting art exhibitions. Yeah, it's good. So back to the start. So yeah, so we've now Freedom Agency. We've been at it for like a year and a half. Today I see myself more of a freedom fighter than a CEO or executive creative director or whatever. We fight for, or I try to fight for creative freedom, something that you don't always get with regular clients, and that's why we, like I said, that's why we founded the Cope, which is an independent magazine that we publish ourselves about Copenhagen in English. It's about 40% a guide to all the cool and local independent places. We have one rule, is that we try not to go on the juice and stuff, but rather find the small, unique, independently held bars and coffee shops and clothing stores and whatever in Copenhagen. And then we distribute at all the hotels in the printed form, and we send it out and use it. And so we primarily targeted the tourists, but also expats. And I'd say our brand awareness about the Cope is about as small as issues here in Denmark. Not a lot of people know of us, but the ones that do pick it up really find it useful and really think it's a great thing to do for when people come here and visit. So yeah, so that's fun. And you know, I'm invited here today to talk about the art of picking the perfect cover. I think you might have to lower your expectations slightly, because I don't have a recipe to pick the perfect cover. And being a small independently held magazine, you don't have access to all the interesting people that, you know, Ørum or all the big fashion magazines, GQ or whatever they have, because we're a small independent. So you really have to be that extra bit creative to produce an exciting cover in order for people to pick up your magazine. I'm not going to lie, sometimes the cover is something that we, you know, decide on 3 hours before deadline, because we get all these great images shot by really cool and great international photographers that send in their work. And we, it's always hard to choose what's going to go on the cover. And sometimes you hit and sometimes you miss. We've been quite lucky with the covers we've chosen. And we've always been fortunate to produce the magazine in a time where the person on the cover was highly relevant. So this guy here, Jacob Mushangama, is a local, well, he's not really an activist, but he kind of is. He's a big fighter for freedom of speech and a part of an international think tank. And the day that this version of the Cope came out, he published his book as well called Men, which is like a tribute to the freedom of speech here in Denmark, and the whole story about how that came about. So that was really lucky that the book came out the same as the cover, and got shared quite a bit. But yeah, I was trying to find out what covers to talk about. This is what we've done for the past 2 years. So we do a lot of covers. A lot of them are commercial. A lot of them are not commercial. They vary from shopping center catalogs to high-end art museum books. So we do span quite widely and have a very big variety. But before I talk more about our covers, I thought it'd be interesting to talk about what covers has inspired me in the past, and what kind of covers that stood out in my mind. I've been at this, like I said, for more than 20 years. So I was like, when I got invited to do this talk, I went home and switched everything off and turned off the light in my basement and tried to think, what covers can you actually remember for the past 20 years? Which is not an easy job, because you see a lot, and if you're a big sucker for print and magazines, then you pick up a lot of magazines, and so it was kind of a hard challenge. These 4 are the ones that made the cut for me. Some of them you know, some of them you don't know. Some of them are recent, like the Kinfolk one is quite recent. I think it's about a year old, a bit more maybe. And the one to the far right is actually from '99. The Helmut Newson book with the shot is from 1980. And I think these to me represent different virtues when choosing a cover and essentially the face of your publication that you want people to pick it up from. I think when I think of Kinfolk, this is the cover that came up. I think it's really cool because it's so simple. It's very strong. You've got, you know, a dark-skinned girl on a pale background, which is just like really graphic, and with the round hat, to me it's just like it's almost like an icon. This cover, it stands out to me, and it was so crisp and so clean that I really wanted to pick it up, which I did. Ended up paying more than 100 krona for that magazine just because I had to have it, which I think is one thing. The next one I'm going to get a bit more into. I've been skateboarding since I was 8 years old, and although it doesn't look like it, but I have. It's true. And the guy who did this cover is also the guy who did a very famous album cover for a very famous band that played here in Copenhagen yesterday. It's from my time, so I don't expect you guys to know. Third one is obviously Kate Moss, and I just think Love is like a big magazine for me. It's really like a kingpin on something that I look to because I think it's just such a great magazine. But you know, all magazines try to be cool and they try to be, you know, especially fashion magazines. But when you write something like this as hardcore, you have to kind of like have the ability to back that up. And when you show a series of Kate Moss shot by, I think, Stephen Meisel, over 18 pages inside, and I think she's snogging Kendall Jenner or something, another like huge supermodel. I think that's something that can back that kind of headline. And to me, she is just the epiphany of hardcore. I think she's like an icon in herself. The last one with Helmut Mutum, I'm going to get into that as well. But that cover to me represents the craftsmanship. I really like craftsmanship. I really like when people don't grab something online and print it or steal an idea and make a little variation. I really like when people come up with something original. I'm going to get back into why I think this is really represents craftsmanship. But to start with the first one, I went to this concert yesterday. Very, very long concert, but good. The artist here is Robert Williams. He's a super famous California-based American artist who works with everything from watercolor to oil and canvas and gouache. And so this album, Appetite for Destruction, which is one of the biggest albums in the late 80s, I think it's safe to say, is the title. The band named the album Appetite for Destruction based on Robert's painting, which is called Appetite for Destruction. So that's why they named the album after that. Essentially, because of a lot of record deals back in that day, they couldn't sell the album because it was too violent for America. So essentially, the cover ended up being the one on the lower right-hand side, which is what some people know as the tattoo that Axl Rose, the lead singer, has in his forearm, which then became like as famous as the other one. But so that to me just represents a big cover, album cover in the beginning. But then to get someone like Robert Williams to actually hand make a cover, oil and canvas, for an independently held skateboard magazine in the late 90s, which I'm pretty sure that he didn't get any money for. I just think that's pretty impressive. So that was a big one for me. That when I saw, you know, being a skateboarder picking up Thrash Awards, they got Robert Williams on the front cover. That was pretty big for me. And it represents an era where you had the time to hand make a cover. You know, sit down and we should be on the cover when we come out in 6 weeks. Well, we should get Robert Williams. Sure. Well, let's get him in and brief him, and then he goes back to the studio and hand paints a cover. You know, I don't think a lot of magazines do that these days. I think that the more like we do it gets chosen the night before we go to print, and it's most likely like some photographer shot it the week before. You know, so this is just, it says something about there was probably more money in industry back then to maybe pay someone to do a cover, or maybe the local artist had time to say, I'll do this. You know. So that was that. So I hope all of you guys know who Helmut Newton is. Truly icon of a German photographer who is, I think, was born in 1920. The king of analog, you know, shooting on film, on Hasselblad, and just like the guy who is, to me, is just like a godfather of craftsmanship when it comes to photography. I think the cover for this book, which is called the Sumo book, it was really big and it came on like a separate stand, and I think it weighs 25 kilos. The book is the original book. I think that this cover to me is just so breathtaking because this is at a time shot in 1980 where you don't have Photoshop, right? Everything is done with natural lighting, and the retouching that was done was very minimum, let's put it that way, because retouching back then on film and in the darkroom was pretty hard. So you had to get, you know, a lot of things right in the shoot. I think, without getting into too much graphic details, I think if you look at this area, you will see that nothing has been removed. So it's quite natural. There's no sign of like retouching or making her more beautiful than she is. And, you know, she's a pretty beautiful woman. So that itself is just like, you know, there's no need to retouch, but it's just like everything is like really strictly handmade. The reason I put in Mariah Carey down there on the right is this is a CD that came out in the late 90s called Mariah's Number Ones. I'm not a big Mariah Carey fan, but I just thought it was funny. I don't know if they've made this cover for Mariah based on that book, but there's certainly a resemblance, I think. The true story about Mariah Carey's cover is that her legs were extended 15 centimeters because she's about this tall in real life. And that to me is just like the completely opposite of what that great Helmut Newton cover represents to me. You know, photoshopping a singer's legs longer to me is just, it won't happen at Freedom, let me put it that way. So going back to the Cope magazine, which is what we do ourselves, I tried to find the 4 most interesting covers that we've done. We've only done about 10 or 12, so there weren't that many to choose from, but these 4 years. The 2 first ones, we got really, really lucky and got people on the front cover that I never thought was going to be possible. First one is Obey Shepard Fairey, which is, I was going to tell you that he's the biggest street artist in the world, but then some guy called Banks, he might be a little bit offended. But I think it's fair to call him number 2. And he has a really strong link to Copenhagen. He's done the mural out at Jagtvej, and he's done like actually more murals, also one in Vesterport around the city. He really loves Copenhagen. He's a bit older than me, so he grew up with 80s skateboarding as well. And one of his favorite skateboarders of the 80s of all time is a Danish guy called Søren, who he really liked his style. So he's been coming to Copenhagen quite a bit. But being able to reprint a Shepard Fairey artwork on the cover of the Cope for nothing and get his blessing, and he really liked it, is to me was just like a milestone in my, you know, modest career. So that was a big thing for us, even though it's not something we created, and I don't have the same ownership with this cover because we didn't produce this cover, but being able to show his artwork was just, that's, you know, hands down, that was more than enough for us. Second one there was a hard one. It's the guy who's lighting a cigarette is an award-winning documentary filmmaker called Bailey Walsh from England, who he's 50-some years old. He's done an award-winning documentary about Bruce Springsteen called Springsteen and I. It's only edited from fan footage. He's also done a black and white film about Oasis, shot on 8mm, where he followed the band for a year and a half, called Lord Don't Slow Me Down. Highly recommend you watch it, even if you're not an Oasis fan. It's a pretty interesting film. But that guy is just a really, really legendary filmmaker when you cross the channel. I'm going to come back to that cover in a little while. The third one is a local Danish filmmaker called Nicola Donato, who is a totally unknown guy and really a risk to put on the cover if you want people to pick it up. But he came out with a film right when we came out with the mag that has a strong relevance to why he's alone in a boat. I'll come back to that as well. The fourth one is the first ever cover we did for the Cope, which was big for us because we were the first magazine, the first Danish magazine, to be let into the backstage area of the Han Copenhagen show during Fashion Week. They liked the idea that we were an independent held magazine and that we want to do something cool. So that shot is shot by one of our photographers on the side of the catwalk when they come onto the stage, and we were the only ones that were allowed to shoot a picture from that weren't meant to go into the like mass press. And being able to mention Han Copenhagen and Aske Larsen on the cover for us was pretty big as a Danish Copenhagen-based magazine, two of the biggest designers here. So that was the first cover, and I just thought that was an interesting one to bring in because it's still a strong cover, I think. Going back to the Bailey cover, this is this is where I thought it was really fun and challenging and so difficult to be the shot caller, because this guy is a huge filmmaker, like we said. But what people don't know is that the image on the right is shot by Christian Larsen, which is a Swedish photographer. This is one of his best friends. He's the guy who did the Swedish House Mafia documentary. It's like one of the biggest photographers around in Scandinavia right now. So how do you go from having an image from Christian Larsen that we got for free because of the link to the cover star, and then we completely mash it up and just don't use it, but draw it, to do a drawing based on that image instead? We had to get the blessing from Bailey and from Christian Larsen. He was like, yeah, that's really cool. And then we got a local Danish girl to do the illustration with a ball pen. So that was a big call. It was just like, okay, so it's the second magazine. We had the chance of coming out and, hashtagging Christian Larsen and telling about, oh, we got a guy that charges, I don't know, €1 million a day for a fashion shoot to do our little cover for our tiny magazine that at that time came out in 4,000 copies. That could have been a big enough story, as it were. But we chose to do something different and do it an illustration instead. And notoriously, illustration-based covers are just, they don't sell, they don't get picked up. So we're a free publication, so we didn't worry too much about that. But it was definitely a risk that we took. But you can see the real live version of and Christian Larsen's images inside, and read the interview with Bailey, which is it's a good story. While I interviewed Bailey Walsh in Karl Marx's original office in Soho in London, which is a private membership club that he's a member of, the interview got interrupted twice by Daniel Craig calling him, as in James Bond, and I could just tell from across the table that it was James Bond, completely starstruck. Not by the guy I was interviewing, but by the voice on the end of the other phone. He's like, "Hi, it's Dan." It was just completely James Bond. He was standing in Covent Garden looking for Bailey's house key to go into his apartment. He couldn't find it, and people started gathering around, asking for his autograph. So Bailey, having rejected the call 3 times because he was talking to me, freaking nobody from Copenhagen, he goes, "Sorry, can I take this call?" "Yeah, you can take the call from James Bond. So it's okay." So there's a good story about that in the mag. So going back to Nicola, who's a Danish guy, pretty unknown at this time. Started as a chef out in Finnbyen, out in Hvidovre, where he worked where the Centropa guys are having their lunch, cleaning dishes and then doing their lunch. And he just said, "I have this mission. I'm going to persuade Peter Olbæk, who's one of the biggest filmmakers in Denmark, to take me on as a completely wildcard director. Got no education within filmmaking, but just really loves film." And he succeeded and ended up. Peter was like, after he'd been stalking him for 3 years, he's like, "Fine, I'll give you a camera and you go and do your documentary and we'll see." So that got shortlisted to, I think it was a Berlinale or something. And then afterwards, the second film, which just came out like about 6 months ago, Fuglene over Sundet, is this really, really strong story about his grandfather, who used to transport Jews across the waters during the Second World War, from a small fisherman town up north called Gilleleje, in a boat like that one. So I just thought it was try to do an idea and a conceptual cover with Nikolai alone on the boat sailing in the waters. I just thought that had a strong link to the story that was out. Really great interview as well with this guy, super honest guy, and if you haven't seen the film, I recommend you see it. It's a strong and true story. So that's how that came about. And then there's the Shepherd one, obviously. Kind of like already talked about that, but yeah. I don't know if you guys know this image, but I'm sure you know his like style and characteristics. So yeah, already mentioned that. That was pretty much it for like regarding to covers. Then I thought I'd poke the bear a little bit and talk about why we invest in print. We're at Issuu. It's a digital publication. We've done a tremendous thing for publishers like us, and the Issuu is like a great tool to get out there and get published and get recognized with whatever you do, whether you do books or magazines or your own portfolio or catalogs for shopping centers. I think Issuu is a really great platform, and then the reach is just, I keep telling people that you have 2 million unique viewers a week. Is that right? That's what, anyway, you don't have to answer that right now. I think that's I was told that at some point, right? Way more. Way more? Okay, well, there you go. It's people are pretty impressed when I say it. I'll get the real numbers then. But so Issuu is definitely a great platform to get your own magazine out. I just think, like I said initially, when we had a little bit of a challenge with the presentation, is that, you know, if you 5 years ago everybody came up to me and said print is dead. You know, in 5 years time there's not going to be a printed magazine. No client's going to spend money on a print catalog, and you know, stuff like flyers and stuff is going to be gone. Everything's going to be digital. It's like, oh, okay, interesting. Yeah, a bit sad, but you know, okay, fair enough. And I think it's fair to say that print is not dead. We used to work for Volvo over at Gray, and he spends, I think it's 3 million a year on 2 publications, which is like 32-page magazines that he distributes with one of the newspapers. And I kept asking him, so, you know, print is dead. You know, you're spending more and more money on digital marketing. Why do you keep, you know, spending 3 million a year on this magazine? And he said, well, with Volvo, if we don't publish a printed magazine twice a year, then our sales in certain regions of the country go down 30%. Because when you buy a Volvo, you do it the other way around. You start online, go to the website, you find out, oh, I really like that new V60, looks cool. You go to the dealership, you get the sales pitch from the guy, you take it for a test drive, then you pick up the printed magazine, you go home, make yourself a cup of coffee and sit in front of the fireplace and read it from back to back. I mean, they've been doing test runs like, so what's on page 14? Did you get the bit about how we invented the 3-point seat belt? Yeah, I got that, but I also know how you guys invented the catalysator. I don't know what that's called, the stuff that, you know, filters the CO2 coming out, yada yada. So people sit there and read all these anecdotes about Volvo and the ventilations that on the dashboard. They're the only ones that have a vent inside the vent, so it cleans the air coming from the outside. You know, all these crazy stories. That the target audience of Volvo just love to sit there with a cup of coffee and read these physical magazines. So it's the other way around. And you know, going back to Netto, which is the slightly opposite, is that if they make a boo-boo with the front cover, if they choose to feature rye bread instead of, you know, mozzarella cheese during the summer, then, you know, the sales go down like some 5 to 10%. So I think print still has, you know, definitely like a commercial relevance, but I think for us, when you combine print and digital, I think that's a really, really strong stronghold. And you know, we try to combine print with all sorts of media for our clients. So if we do like an event where we build like a skateboard ramp for a client, and then we film it and do a little short form documentary and stick it on the social media platform. But then we also do a printed version to back it up. For Blend and Palace, we do the 200-page coffee table books that are sent out to the biggest art dealers and art critics in the world, but we also do a 5-minute film about the exhibition. So those two hand in hand just go really well together. And they're actually gonna do their books digitally as well, probably using Issuu as a platform. So I think it's just, sometimes for us, it's just important not to only look digitally, but also look at print. And it's always hard to get a client to invest in the right paper quality and stuff like that. But for us, it's still something that we spend a little bit of time on. That was kind of it for me. If you have any questions, I'm here. Shoot, no dumb questions. And if you just want to have some more breakfast and coffee, then that's fine too. Yeah.